Hello, everyone. This is Andrew. Welcome to Atomo. It's Thursday, December 22. I want to talk a little bit about the election down in Arizona, and we have the trial that happened. I just had enough time to look through day one. I didn't have a chance to look through day two and to see what day two was happening. But what I wanted to do here was just take a look at the theories that are being presented and kind of just take a look at, well, how with the system that is in play, how might uh, that system be circumvented to kind of create an election result that is quite in dispute. So what I'll do is I will share a screen here. Let's see. Let's put this one up. Okay. So the Viva and Barnes group here put together, I'll zoom this in. Okay. So there was one of the witnesses that went on the stand produced this flow chart of how the flows of the ballots were working. So from what I understand, what's happening here is, and for this, like, just I'm not giving any legal advice, not giving any like sort of election advice. I'm just looking at this, providing some analysis. What happens in the court happens in the court. I'm not, I'm just taking the information here and saying, okay, well, what might the legal theory be for potentially showing that there's a problem with the election in the limited knowledge that I have. So here is the idea. Okay, voter makes sense, goes to a drop box. Okay, then a ballot courier comes to the drop box, and then I didn't quite understand what the MC Tech piece does. I don't know if the, like, I know uh, perhaps they collate the ballots into packages and then move them through a transport truck to a group called Runbeck. And at Runbeck, there are poll watchers there, and they do the envelope scans and I guess make sure that the ballots are ready for eventual tabulation. So then they're transported over to the primary tabulation center where they're run through the tabulators and everything's hunky dory. Okay. The United States Postal Service has something similar. Yep. Then they go to Runbeck again. So we do have this area where it's common in both of the processes. Okay. So let's jump to one of the first problems that was being brought up is this door number 3 thing. Um, so the idea is, and there is a lot of talk about problems with the tabulators not taking the ballots and rejecting the ballots. Okay, so the one theory that's been presented is, well, there was a problem with the ballot image. So what happens is there is no set. Now I'm going to give it a little bit of context because I've been a deputy returning officer in Canadian federal elections, and it's a different system than this system. Canadian federal election does not use computer tabulators or mechanical tabulators or computer systems at all. It is little pencils and pieces of paper. So in this system, when you check in, so there's a check-in process in the Arizona system. When you check in, because perhaps you come from different counties, the counties may have questions on the ballot that are specific to those counties. So you get a ballot image that's rendered on the fly, and they have to actually print you out a ballot. Okay, so you walk in, say, okay, here I am. Okay, you get the ballot printed out with the slate of people that you're looking to elect, and then a slate of perhaps ordinances and questions that you're voting yes or no on. And the images are stored in the computer. And when you sign up, you get the actual physical ballot printed out for you. Okay. You then go to the secure station, you mark it with the Sharpie in your bubbles of what you want to vote for. Then you walk the ballot over to the tabulator and you yourself put it into the tabulator. And if it goes through the election official standing beside the tabulator, if everything's okay, it'd be great. The tabulator takes the ballot and it drops it into a bin. Now, and I think the bins are labeled 1 and 2. I'm not sure exactly which bin it drops into, but there's a click an indicator. Okay, that ballot was cool, drops in, tabulated. You're good to go. If it spits the ballot back out and you push it back in, it spits the ballot back out and you push it back in, it spits the ballot back out. Okay, well, there's something wrong with the ballot. You can put it into here, door number 3. The door number 3 ballots. Okay, so all these get collected. And what they're saying is, let me show you some additional stuff here. So we'll go to, okay, well, let's jump over to PolitiFact and look at a couple of things that was being brought up as far as, well, there's some conspiracies going on. So first of all, there were trucks delivering ballots to the Runbeck Election Services. Okay, this is as expected. They need to get the ballot from the drop boxes or from, I guess, the collating center, MC Tech, which bundles them up so they can go to the appropriate centers. Maybe they're organized in a particular way, so they go to a set of poll watchers who then check the signatures, scan the signatures, check the signatures. So I believe they keep a digital scan record of the signatures. So if there's something that comes up later, they can just double check. But then what happens is the secret seat envelope with the signature on front is broken and opened under the watch of the poll watchers. So a claim was made that there were no Republican observers. And they're saying here the Republicans said, yeah, we had observers there. So we're not anticipating any shenanigans with that part. Let's assume that everything was working properly there. You had the appropriate poll watchers. You had truck coming in and delivering the ballots as expected. Okay. Great. So let's put that to rest because that doesn't factor into the theory at this point. Okay. So voter, drop box, then there's a courier, then it goes to, I guess, the sorting, collating facility, then goes to Runbeck for the checks, and there's an additional piece that happens with Runbeck that we'll get into. Okay, then goes out to tabulation. Okay, so door number 3 ballots, let's go back to these. Door number 3 ballots are then collected. Okay, so what happens is now we have to have a process here where door number 3 ballots are then moved to Runbeck. So they created a process and said, well, what's going to happen is because your ballots are not reading properly, what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the ballots. So whatever you selected, we're going to duplicate it onto an appropriate ballot that can be read and preserve your election selections. Okay. And what they do is they have a run list of serial numbers, and on the original ballot they'll write a serial number. And then on the ballot that's scanned, they'll write the same serial number. Then they'll run the duplicated ballot, or they'll pack them up and have the duplicated ballots ready, and then they get transported to the tabulation center. So they all have the serial number on them. So you should have not so good ballot, and then you have the cured ballot that's ready to go. That will go to tabulation. Okay. So why door number 3 in the first place? Okay, well, the first theory that was brought forward during the trial is, well, the images have to be of a certain size. So what they are talking about is, well, there's this 19-inch image that gets printed on a 20-inch ballot. And there's talk that, well, we shouldn't have, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've seen this and it looks like it got reversed, but I believe what's happened is they should not have had a 19-inch image. There should have been a 20-inch image that fits on the 20-inch ballot paper. So there's a ballot paper that's 20 inches long. So you have to make sure that the image overlays properly onto the actual piece of paper. If it's a 19-inch image, then what happens is there's a suggestion that there was a kind of expanding to fit onto the page, which is a printer setting. So it'll take the 19-inch image, but it'll fit it to the 20-inch page. Well, what happens is when you do that, the tabulator is looking for the bubbles in a very specific position. So when you push that ballot in, like even the control lines may not line up properly. So the tabulator is like, no, this is not correct. You're not giving me what I need. So then it gets kicked out and put into door number 3 that you see here. Now there was talk, and a bit in the trial, what they're doing is they're trying to anticipate the number of voters that were coming in that were going to vote for one particular party. And they thought, okay, well, since that's potentially going to be at a higher rate, and then it's seemingly, I'm going to say seemingly, that on one part is, well, it looked like there's one case where the ballots weren't printing properly. There was fading that was happening. And there's one theory that, well, the breakdown was because just didn't order enough supplies. There wasn't enough toner. Even one of the witnesses talked about, well, yeah, we're shaking the cartridges and stuff to get it running. So they order when you do these things, you go to your administrators and say, okay, we think we're going to have so many pollers coming in, therefore we can only run so many ballots through our printers before we have to change printer cartridges. That means we have to have a set number of supplies on site. So that was one idea that was brought forward. I think with the primary idea that they're zeroing in on is that something happened here where they should not have had these 19-inch images in the systems. Should have been 20-inch image printing on a 20-inch ballot. So I said, because what happens is when they set up these machines, I'm in technology, so I've done this kind of stuff many, many times. You don't want to be doing bespoke configuration on hundreds of systems. The concept is pets and cattle. Pets is when you have a very specialized system set up and configured for what you need it to do, especially when you're doing software development or configuration of these sort of systems. And if you have one system and you only need one system, like just say you're doing a little school election and you just have one voting system, well, then you'll probably just set that up however you need. When you're talking about hundreds of these things, you basically build a template and then you like rubber stamp the template into each of the computer systems. Okay. Now, in order to, given I'm assuming everything's happening properly, is once you build that image, then there's a script that will run that will copy that image out to all the systems and then verify that, yes, I've run these to all the systems. And then there should be an audit or a check done on each of the systems to certify that, yes, we are getting the proper image printed onto the paper and it's being selected by the tabulator, and the tabulator is adding, there's a couple of checks. So the tabulator is doing what it needs to do. So when the original configuration image is created, that is tested. And then there's multiple test cases that they run it through. And you have to, like, basically it's a tick box exercise. Does it do this? When the ballot's spoiled this way, does it do that? So, here's the test, here's the expected results. Does it meet the expected results? Test passed. So then they certify it based on that. And then they lock the image and then push the image out to all the machines in a way that, can you put a different image on a particular machine? There's a possibility, but there has to be like a chain of control on those scripts that can get certified, and then there's to be a log file showing which the scripts that run and the actual images. And you can even go as far as certifying the file, that the file is the absolute specific file with the image configuration. There's ways of doing security to hash those files, and hash is just a very technical term for creating a fingerprint. And so I see the file fingerprint of the file that's on the machine to what was sent. So it is possible to change that script, but it means that there's somebody who's had to been an actor in it that was purposely, that was the argument that was put forward by one of the witnesses, is you just can't do this accidentally. And I know from being in programming and development, to push the wrong script to many systems, it's going to create a trace. There's going to be logs on it. There's going to be fingerprints and records on all that. So there's something there that could potentially be discovered. And yes, that stuff can be cleaned and swept under the carpet, but that takes a very significant amount of effort. And that was the point that was being put forward. So the idea here is to create a problem such that I have to put a significant number of ballots into door number 3. And this starts the theory. So the theory is, no, now that I have all these ballots going into door number 3, okay. So let me jump out of this for a moment. I might jump back to it a bit later. Okay. So when you go in and register, you're actually checked on a voter roll. So it's possible to see the people who've actually come in and registered to vote. Okay. So let me bring back up the flowchart piece. Let's do this one and jump back to, let's see, let's stop you for a moment. Okay, here's our flowchart. Bring our flowchart back here. Okay. So the ballots run through, and then we get to a point, there's another flow here where the door number 3 ballots have to come into Runback. The door number 3 ballots going into Runback, as I mentioned before, then get duplicated. Okay. Sounds fair. Here's where the problem comes in. And what was missing and brought up during the trial is the one witness, Miss Honey was the witness. What she said is, well, I did a request to get the chain of custody documents, because if I pick up a door number 3 bin, then what happens is, if I crack open door number 3 bin and I have 300 ballots in that door number 3 bin, then I need to document onto a chain of custody form that I have 300 ballots coming out of a door number 3 bin. Then Runback does their thing, they duplicate the ballots, then they get sealed back up. I need to have yet another document, because what happens is typically these are kind of however they have the seals. So in the Canadian election, I had a whole bunch of stickers. If I crack open my box, then when I reassemble my ballot box, because again, in the Canadian one, we're using a paper system. So if I crack open my box, I have to write onto my control document exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing that. Then if there are actual ballots in it and I needed to reopen the box for any reason, I have to go through and I actually have to assess all those ballots. Even during voting, what happens is with the paper voting system, there's something called a foil, which is like a tear off tab on the ballot. I have to take the ballot, close the ballot up, signature or initial the ballot that I've documented that I have that ballot in my ballot control book, write down the seal number, and then rip off the what they call the foil, and I have to put that in a special pouch. Then I hand the ballot to the elector. They go and they mark the ballot. They come back, and I check again that the serial number of the ballot is in fact the serial. Like they didn't like switch ballots or do anything that. So that's the chain of custody even on the ballot. So when the elector walks away behind the screen, that they're not coming back and giving me something different. Okay. So then I do that check, and if it all checks out, I say, okay, then the elector gets the ballot, and then the elector puts it into the ballot box. Great. So at the end of the day, what I need to do is I need to add up the number of foils to the number of ballots in the ballot box. The moment I crack that ballot box, I have to write down that I broke the seal. Each seal has a serial number on it. And I have to write down that I broke the seal, and then do like okay, open box for doing the counting to count the vote. Then when it's done, I have to reseal the box with a brand new seal and write down on my control sheet that I resealed the box and the reason for doing that. Okay, so we need the same thing to happen here. So with the transport truck, and when those bins are open and they're cracked, and then they should be filling out on a form. Okay, I'm cracking the seal. I got so many ballots that are in that bin. I do my thing, repackage it, put it together, reseal it with the appropriate count that has to match when that box was opened. And there are control sheets for it. What was missing, and what Ms. Honey did, who's one of the witnesses, is ask for those documents that say, okay, these are chain of custody documents. What goes in must equal what goes out. And the lawyers for Arizona, the defense, because all the exhibits are done prior, there's no surprises during the trial. They know which exhibits that you might be entering, or if they do enter it in the moment, then you have to get permission from both sides. But for the most part, a lot of what I believe is a lot of the evidence that's going to be entered has to be staged or put together into a package so that the defense or both sides can see what's going to happen. So the Arizona defense lawyer should have known that, hey, I should just get all the chain of custody documents. And if someone says, well, your chain of custody is broken, they go, nope, here's all the documents. Here's everything that shows chain of custody. Well, what happened during the trial is the witness claimed, hey, we don't have the chain of custody documents. And there was no, like, what do you mean? We have the chain of custody documents. Like, there's no retort, no showing that, okay, well, we're going to produce those or we're going to get those. So that's the missing link right now. So if you have no chain of custody documents of saying, okay, what's the number of ballots that went in, and that should equal the number of ballots going out. If I don't have the chain of custody documents, then what I can potentially do is I can insert ballots into runback. So if I know that a certain candidate is pulling ahead, then I can activate my troops. We can take a look and see, okay, well, which potential people have not voted yet, because we have the voting books. those are available. And you can see that you have certain people that haven't signed in yet in any way, shape, or form. Then you can actually go out to their places, knock on their door, say, "Oh, have you voted in the election yet?" "Oh, no, I haven't." "Well, did you have your ballot there?" And since all the ballots are standardized and they get mailed out, there's really no chain of custody on the blank ballots. So if I can go and I can get blank ballots, so this was another theory that happened is, well, some of the ballots are just dumped in mail rooms and stuff. It's like, okay, I just have to go if I'm wanting my certain candidate to win, then I'll go and I'll find these blank ballots that are just lying around and pick them up. And then as I'm going through my list of people who are registered for my party, I can then double check with them and say, "Have you voted already?" "Oh, you haven't?" "Well, actually, you misplaced your ballot." "Well, I got one right here." And since they're all standard, there's nothing identifiable to them because you can't identify the voter to how they're voting. That's illegal. They can go and they can mark the ballot, seal it up, and give it to my ballot runners, who can then get it in and insert it into Runback. They could just basically create a bin and say, "Look, here, we got this bin." Shoot, in it goes. But if there's no chain of custody documents, I don't know where that bin came from. Or even if I just have a stack of ballots and, I do some shenanigans to, okay, well, I just bring them in a bag and then just somehow get them in there. And then now we have to, like, okay, well, what's the way that they got added? The assumption I'm running on is they just basically had a bin, and then you could basically make it look like you're doing chain of custody, but somehow the documentation is not there. But probably something was done for the poll watchers to look like they're doing chain of custody, but then the chain of custody documents just didn't get put into the record, because those chain of custody documents would have to cut across this whole process. So there'd be a point where all of a sudden I got these chain of custody documents coming up that of these new additional ballots that don't match what was coming from a transport truck here, which then has to chain back to the actual batches, that has to chain back to the actual ballot courier who should have done chain of custody to show, okay, I got the drop box, I got stuff that came in, we did some collating here, and then we started to make sure that the chain of custody was intact, and then that has to run all the way through. So it is possible, if I don't have chain of custody documents, I can inject additional ballots into the system. And given that you have the United States Postal Service, and this takes time from when you say, okay, we're done. If your postmarks are not from a certain point, you're done. We're not going to count those ballots. But if there's ballots still trickling through United States Postal Service, then you have time to actually go out and harvest additional ballots by the time all of the United States Postal Service ballots have completed their moving through the system. So you have that time span to kind of take a look and see how many people are voted, how much do I actually need in order to pull ahead for my candidate, go out, get appropriate ballots, make sure chain of command is chain of custody is not done appropriately, and there you go, off they go to tabulation. So there's a theory for us to consider. Okay, I am going to end that there. Put any comments that you might have below and see if I missed anything, or because it comes down to the chain of custody documents primarily, and if they are missing, then that's that.